channel here over at Subscribestar. So, Mindy Kaling claims Velma is an icon for young gay women in promotion of HBO Max's Velma series. Good luck with that. So, Velma, Mindy Kaling's white whale, her anti-white cancer gets season 2 because, of course it does. Hashtag what is Sodom and Gomorrah? So why do they say they love the origin story so much whenever they do these type of ridiculous interviews? They do these interviews and they never get challenged. Like none of the interviewers ever ask any of these people a real question because it's not just that you won't get another interview with that person, but it's also like HBO just wouldn't give you another interview, and you would just get a reputation of like you ask real questions. I'm not even talking about like hardball, but just like somewhat inquisitive, challenging questions, something. And you notice like every interview now, there are no interviews, and every interview is just the interviewer is just selling advertisement for the person they're interviewing. Like there are no real interviews anymore. It's all of this. It's all just a puff piece. So they love the origin story so much. Well, obviously they don't. If they did, they'd go the Peter Jackson method and try to stick as close to it as possible. If you love the story, you would tell the story. She's talking about representation for brown characters, but don't Europeans also deserve representation? Especially when the original characters as written are blonde and red haired and a Great Dane. Can these modern cultural Marxists really not create anything new? Are they so void of talent that all they can do is act as parasites to a 60-year-old animation instead of simply putting pen to paper and coming up with something? Was Tolkien right? Can evil really not create? It is so funny that he said that. And then they did Rings of Power, and everyone starts looking at Rings of Power and Amazon and Tolkien's quote about evil not being able to create. Think like, oh, that seems to have some deeper meaning there. If you want non-European characters, why don't you just write something fresh? You've got artists and writers. You're surrounded with all these people, and you've got HBO at your beck and call. You could just come up with all these stories that you're familiar with were new at one time. Is that such a foreign concept that you think, oh, we're going to sit down and rewrite Scooby Doo? No, no, no. Just write something new. Like everyone who came before you wrote something new. How pathetic is it to have to subvert and corrupt every single thing you touch? Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings was a massive hit and just, well accepted by everybody. Yet the modern cultural Marxists don't try to tell the original stories anymore because they were obviously created by European men whom they hate, but also who they can't come close to in their own storytelling. I mean, what a cell phone that is to say like the best you can do is subvert and corrupt stories told by other people. They're not telling stories. They're not even trying to make a dollar. If they were, they would go the Peter Jackson route and make a ton of money. They're just using stories of their betters to sell Marxist propaganda. Either tell the original stories or create your own effing story. And yes, those original storytellers were better than the modern ones because they proved it. The modern ones are still stealing their old stories. They cannot create their own. They should be embarrassed. Think how simple a story Scooby Doo is. I don't know when it was, in the 60s or something. Four kids and a dog go on an adventure and solve mostly supernatural type of adventures. Just 25 minutes of fluffy nonsense. But it was five friends who were all together, and they were unlikely friends. They were coming from different, backgrounds, but they all teamed up. They all had their strengths and weaknesses, and they all worked together. And it was about friendship and the whole vibe. Like I think people hate Mindy Kaling and HBO so much because like you miss the whole vibe of Scooby Doo to make something hateful and racist and just grind your anti-white racist acts the whole time. Um, First of all, no, they can't. Apparently, they can't create their own stories because the proof is before you. They don't create their own stories. So, as much as Velma bombed, it's not going to hurt Mindy Kaling. She's a pox walks anti-white racist. She's the puppet to the puppet masters. She's acting according to form. She's part of the humiliation ritual of a conquered people. Looks around, puts on nightmare glasses. Oh, nothing has changed. So, a major network, HBO, will degrade and dehumanize the beautiful people of the light. They will normalize this anti European hatred. Mindy is an open racist, and the network knew this when they approved the show. Nobody has stood up and said, "Oh, wait a minute." And none of the critics, none of anyone with any kind of social media footprint has stood up and said, "Why are we normalizing hatred against one group of people, European people? Why are you defaming and degrading, dehumanizing one group of people? You wouldn't do that to any other group of people as a group." I mean, that seems obviously hypocritical to me. How come more people aren't doing what I'm doing and just making this very obvious, simple issue? Oh, because they get destroyed on social media. You have to start. You have to start standing up. Otherwise, I mean, you cannot allow this. You can't allow this to continue. So the whole show is making fun of one group of people, but they're totally ignoring making fun of Black and Indian people. If you're gonna be istophobic, and if it's all just quote unquote jokes, well, why don't you spread all the humor around? Can you really not find any humor to make fun of the Black and Indian characters? It's only the blonde haired European characters. Because Mindy and the network hate you specifically. How much more obvious does she have to be? There's a line in there where she goes, about white men getting away with murder. The follow up punchline for the other character to say to pull the wind out of her sails would be something about O.J. Simpson, and then it would juxtapose her insane axe grinding and kind of like take the wind out of her sails and say, "Oh yeah, you're going a little too far because you're ignoring the very reality of the situation." It's like white men are not getting away with murder. You literally have an O.J. Simpson character right there. It's like that would have been a funny double joke to kind of put her in her place a little bit. That would have been subverting expectations, the O.J. Simpson punchline. But they're not trying to be funny. She and HBO, they're just anti-white racist. I know I harp on this, but where exactly do you think this is going? At what point are you going to step up and ask them to dial back the racism and hatred? Oh yeah, but can you please stop hating one group of people? I mean, like, why would you hate one group of people, but you wouldn't apply that same standard to any other group of people? You're hating one group as a group. I mean, the obvious hypocrisy of that, and nobody is raising their hand to go, wait a minute, you're just like, you're the bad guys the whole time. Are you saying the left wing was the racists the whole time? Yeah, that's what we've been saying. So if they're completely unopposed with their hatred now, why would they stop? Why wouldn't they just keep going? Do you think they're just joking? If they were joking, they would also make fun of the Black and Indian characters also. Can they really not find anything to make fun of? I mean, like, what do you think would happen if they made fun of the Black and Indian characters in the show? People would lose their mind. It's like, yeah, so how do the blonde and red hair characters feel when they're degraded and dehumanized? Oh, well, they don't count. Well, yes, they do count. They're not joking. They just hate you. When they tell you who they are, believe them. This is who HBO and this is who Mindy is, and everyone's working on the show. This is like just the naked face of their hatred, which is their right. It's their right to hate anyone they want, but it's also good to notice it and identify them. Call it what it is, hatred. Discuss it online. Just be blunt about it. Why does HBO spread hateful jokes about European people but nobody else? Are they incapable of making fun of the Black and Indian characters, or is it just the blonde and red hair characters? Mindy, she says the character's European origin is not central to their characters, except that is the character as written. It's a group of four blonde and red haired, portrayed as European people, the rarest people on earth. That's what they are. That's how they were written. It's just a simple cartoon, but it's like it was the alpha and omega when it was created. You can't change it now. Unless you just want to create something new, which obviously they can't do. They're not Indian or African characters. They're portrayed as blonde and red haired, obviously European Americans in the 1960s when it was written. The difference is we value our tribe and they hate us. They don't value the characters. They think that their portrayal doesn't matter, but they value the non-Euro characters. So they replace one tribe for another. Why would you accept this digital genocide without mentioning it? So she talks about the lack of brown characters in early animation. Okay, that was then. That was in the 60s. That had nothing to do with what's going on now. Was there a lot of European characters in Indian or African animation? You're not changing the past animation by replacing the fair, beautiful characters. You're just subverting and corrupting something good to spread your Marxist Frankfurt School hatred. She feels is still a blonde character because and the way he's portrayed in the first two episodes is so ridiculous. He completely just like a Paris Hilton character. It's like or a Donald Trump type of character. And I was like, Would you do that to any other group of people? Well, clearly, obviously, the answer is no, because she'd be literally get death threats if she did. Um, the blonde character needs to be the object of her hatred and crude body shaming humor. In the world of the globalist media, it's perfectly acceptable to degrade and dehumanize European people. Now, to be fair, everyone hates the show. They call it woke, but they're not specifically calling it anti European or anti white racism. Everyone just seems to hate Mindy for being cringy. I think she confuses the left because, yes, she's brown, fat, and very unattractive, but she's also very successful and part of a super successful group that is statistically one of the wealthiest in America. And when she makes fun of white Americans, she's punching down at a marginalized and oppressed, disenfranchised group of poor people. There are more poor white Americans than any other group because the government started screwing them over by shipping jobs overseas in the 60s. But they are the definition of marginalized and oppressed. And the only thing you look at Mindy Kaling, you're like, you're not punching up against this. Oh well, they're not as a group marginalized and oppressed. I just said they're the more poor white people living in trailer parks than any other group in America. Isn't that the definition of marginalized and oppressed? Obviously, it's like we have the better argument here if you'll only make it, but you have to start making it on social media. These are just hateful people. These are just hateful, racist, evil people. It's okay to call them out on it. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Oh, yeah, they're getting a season 2 because F you. That's why. And I'll see you guys all next episode.